Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor and celebrity spokesmodel for ClassicsToday.com, both the website and the fabulous store, where you can buy all kinds of handy clothing and accessories. Please do, if you have a chance. There's a link at the bottom of this video in the description where you can see what's on offer. Now, today we're going to be talking about some of the best recordings and a general description of Sibelius's Lemminkäinen suite. And in particular, I want to talk about why this is really a symphony, and a little bit about why it couldn't be considered as such when it was first written. Now, Sibelius wrote 4 tone poems on the life of the ne'er-do-well and hero of the Kalevala, Lemminkäinen, like Lemon Pledge or Lemon Tree or Lemon Juice. Lemminkäinen, he really got around. He went to the island of Sari and messed around with the maidens thereupon. And then he went to the land of the dead, Twinella. And then he got killed in Twinella. And his mother had to show up and rake him back together with her magic rake. And then his homecoming is full of a bustle and excitement, and it's a lot like Peer Gynt's homecoming, actually. They're kind of similar characters in a way. One may have inspired the other, for all that I know. In any case, Sibelius wrote these 4 tone poems. Originally, they were supposed to be performed together, and there is some question about the order of the inner movements. The original order had Lemminkäinen in Twinella as number 2, and the Swan as number 3. Actually, only the Swan became super popular as a separate work. And when Sibelius later revised them, he didn't seem terribly interested in keeping them together. He only formally, he revised the whole thing, but he only formally promoted, let's say, the publication and performance of Lemminkäinen's Return and the Swan of Twinella. And the other 2, Lemminkäinen in Twinella, which is the most problematic of them, and Lemminkäinen and the Maidens of Sari, for some reason he wasn't too interested in pushing them. And I think that's a terrible thing. First of all, Lemminkäinen in Twinella, the land of the dead, in the Kalevala, actually works best in the context of the whole thing. It really does. It would be like taking a scherzo movement out of a typical symphony and playing it separately. You might like it. It's very nice, but it works better in its context. Imagine, for example, the scherzo of the Eroica Symphony, and you just play it separately. Perfectly fine, but sort of what is it, right? It works better in its place. And that's true here. That's one of the reasons we can argue that these 4 pieces should be played together as a symphony, which is the way that they've been done in the past 20 or 30 years or so. Now, there were always some good recordings of the batch of 4. Horst Stein did them, and Alexander Gibson did them, and Charles Groves did them, and Eugene Ormandy did them. And there's no shortage historically. I think Thomas Janssen did it in the 50s, but they were not usually given together. And most conductors preferred to do just the most popular bits and leave out the rest. But this is a symphony. And it's a symphony by the most conservative possible definition of what a symphony is. The most conservative possible romantic definition of what a symphony is an orchestral work in 4 movements, one of which is in sonata form. Well, that's exactly what Sibelius gives us. Not only does he give us a sonata form, but we've got a typical slow movement. We've got a scherzo in classic ABA scherzo form, and we have a rondo-ish finale. It could not possibly be more symphonic. And more than that, there are motivic links between the various sections to unify the cycle. And I don't need to go into that. You can just listen to it yourself and make up your own mind what those might be. They're not obvious, but they're there. And the most fascinating thing, I think, is the perfectly gorgeous sonata form of Lemminkäinen and the Maidens of Sari. And I want to just go through it really, really, really fast so that you know exactly what's going on. It's so much fun. It's such a beautiful work. First of all, I have this fabulous recording of it. This is Live Segerstam with the Helsinki Philharmonic. It's coupled with Tapiola on Ondine, and it's just a fantastic performance. And this one has Lemminkäinen in Twinella second. Most of the time these days, it's the Swan of Twinella second, but nowadays, who knows what's going to happen. Anyway, the point is, it begins with an introduction, Lemminkäinen and the Maidens of Sorry, and that introduction begins with the most amazing chord. I love the sonority of this chord. Listen to the opening chord. Here it is. Now, what instruments played that? What is Sibelius doing? It's so extraordinary. A simple chord. It's the voicing and the pitch level. It's just four horns. That's all it is. It's just the horn section. Somehow it sounds like something else entirely. It's the mark of genius, a genius orchestral writer who can make a totally original sound. You listen to that one chord and you know you're talking about legendary times. It's got more atmosphere. And it's just four horns. I mean, using conventional instruments to make entirely new and evocative sounds. And this piece is full of those kinds of sonorities everywhere. It's just amazing. So there's an introduction, okay? And the introduction introduces. Then we have the main body of the sonata movement. So here is the first subject, because sonata form movements, as you know, have first subjects, second subjects, developments, a recapitulation of the first two subjects, and a coda, usually. So here is the first subject of Lemminkäinen and the Maidens of Sorry, I don't know how you pronounce it, Sorry, like that. Here you go, first subject. Wonderful, folk-like, haunting, gets under your skin. That is what I call in my book on Sibelius a Kalevala tune. They're tunes that Sibelius uses whenever he seems to be resorting to Kalevala subjects. They are not folk tunes. Sibelius invented this musical idiom for his Kalevala stories all by himself. And one of the hallmarks of those tunes is that they always return to the same note. They move within a narrow range. And in this case, it's, dum bum bum ba da dum bum bum ba da 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 dum bum bum ba da dum bum 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 ba da dum bum ba. Yeah, it's always based around a single note with a pedal point quite often, which means a bass note that sticks around on the bottom. So that's the first subject. And there's a transition. And eventually, with a return to motives from the introduction, and that's a hint, motives from the introduction are going to be important, not just in this particular movement. And then we get to the second subject, which is love music. It's obviously love music. It's intensely passionate and given, instead of from the woodwinds, to the strings. So here is the love music, the second subject of the sonata form. So that rises to a big climax, and then we get a development section full of mysterious folk fiddling and scurrying string passages, and it gets more and more exciting and builds up to this huge climax. And in this climax, the original first subject returns, eventually screamed out on two piccolos, and then Sibelius will cut directly, just like Haydn does, with an abbreviated transition to the love music second subject. So here is the moment of recapitulation, which is just marvelously done. And that's basically all you need to know. Then the love music comes back, it rises to an even bigger climax, and eventually the piece fades away back into the mists of legend and mythology. It's just gorgeous. Why this piece didn't acquire an independent life, I have no clue. It's as great a single movement as Sibelius ever wrote. It is as fully symphonic a movement as Sibelius ever wrote. Now, by the time Sibelius actually came to doing his his authentic numbered first symphony, he had turned his back on the sort of romantic programmatic school of Liszt, which he totally acknowledged. I mean, Kullervo, with its male chorus and group of 5 movement / tone poem things, is also a symphony, but it's a symphony in the manner of, say, Liszt's A Faust symphony. It's that kind of thing with the literary influence, and so is this. And he was much more interested in following a more abstract path. Why he was? Partly it was his inner development, his inner feeling for, what a symphony should be. And he had a very strong, or came to have a very strong idea about it, as in, for example, his famous discussion with Mahler, where he talked about the logical, organic interrelationship between all of the constituent parts and whatnot. Partly it was because he was a big fish in a little pond, the little pond being Finland, and his market was Germany. And he wanted to be accepted as an abstract symphonist outside of Finland. That was a big, big issue because it was the only way he could make money effectively if it was through performance of his works. And of course, he failed dismally at that. They've never accepted him in Germany particularly. But the truth of the matter is, it was much easier to sell Symphony No. 3 to a non-Finnish audience than it was to sell Lemminkäinen Symphony, especially when so many others of that type, that is like Tchaikovsky's Manfred, Berlioz's Harold in Italy, these sort of quasi-programmatic symphonies with stories or literary bases, were always looked on somewhat askance by conservative critics and audiences and conductors. And also, they were not terribly successful, or at least not regarded as terribly successful. It would be very easy to imagine Sibelius insisting that Lemminkäinen was really his second symphony, to see him pigeonholed as one of those late romantic Lisztian program symphony guys who was inept at handling symphonic forms. And he was never inept at handling symphonic forms. Never, ever, ever. Not at any point in his life. But that you could see happening. You could see it happening very, very easily. And so when he came to revise the piece and prepare it for publication and whatnot, he allowed it to be detached and dispersed. But Sibelius was wont to say that in reality he had composed 9 symphonies, and indeed he did. And this is the second of them. And I hope that this little example has given you a sense of just how symphonic the whole cycle really is. You can hear the rest on your own. I do want to make one other statement, though, about Lemminkäinen and Twinella. It's a tough piece to imagine as a standalone kind of piece, because, first of all, the outside is kind of like the music to The Tempest. You've got this kind of heavily chromatic, almost quasi-atonal, tremolo string stuff that rises to a couple huge climaxes, and then at the biggest one of them, there's this huge cymbal crash, and it's the death of Lemminkäinen. He gets hacked to bits. And then his mother shows up with her magic rake and reassembles him. But it really is a simple A-B-A scherzo and trio form. It's not a happy trio or a happy scherzo, let's put it that way. It's not a jokey scherzo. But in the context of these 4 movements, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. It really, really does. And I would not want to be without it. It has the opening, the middle section, that trio section is really hauntingly beautiful. It really, really is. So and then the hell music, kind of like Tchaikovsky's Francesca da Rimini too. It begins and ends with the swirling strings of hell. Where Sibelius got his influences. And like I said, he was pretty frank about them. And it ends with an abbreviated version of the return to the land of the dead music, just like Francesca da Rimini does. And, it's a terrific piece that really, really adds something to the cycle of 4. So let's talk about some performances. Now, this is one of my very, very favorite ones, the Helsinki Philharmonic with Leif Segerstam. It's glorious in every respect. One of the 2 really, really great ones, I feel, that you should listen to. But I have half a dozen of them here. You remember I made a whole list of other ones at the beginning, but the ones that I play that I really like hearing time and time again, this one is likely to be overlooked. Jukka-Pekka Saraste, which is really beautiful. The Finnish Radio Symphony Orchestra at RCA. This whole box has got like all of his tone poems and theatrical music, or big chunks of it anyway, or all the stuff that matters, along with the symphonies. It's 8 CDs. Most of the time, the symphonies come on 3. So all the other CDs are other stuff. And it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to have. So I recommend it if it's still around, that you grab it. It's just a good deal. Then there's Osmovenska. Now, this is his second recording of it. The first one, he blew. It was a dud from, both sonically and interpretively. But this remake is marvelous, and it's coupled with the Wood Nymph. And it's, that's a huge bonus from the same period that also Sibelius never revived. That makes this a terrific disc. And the performances are somewhat lighter than we're used to, a little bit less heavy duty, but elegant and beautiful, with the Lahti Symphony playing wonderfully. It's on bis, and it's fantastic. Also excellent, really, really first rate, Pavel Yarvey with the Royal Stockholm Philharmonic. This is on Virgin. It was re-released in a little box with all of his Sibelius. He also did like The Maiden in the Tower. There's some really interesting stuff there too. So Pavel Yarvey is worth considering. And also worth considering Esa-Pekka Salonen with the Los Angeles Phil. Note the cinematic Los Angeles cover. I don't know what this has to do with Sibelius's Lemminkäinen legends, but on Saga is pretty hot too. And with this recording has his bass response. Sibelius at this point in his career had a bass drum mania. And boy, oh boy, you should hear how the climax of On Saga, it's going to blow your speakers to smithereens. It's unbelievable. But the Lemminkäinen legends here are really, really exciting and well done also. So that's nice to have. However, if I had to pick one, my favorite for just a combination of mythological atmosphere and interpretive daring, and it's going to surprise you. It's also on bis, and it isn't Osmovenska. It's Niemi Yarvey, who did it twice. He did this twice. He did it also on Deutsche Grammophon, with both with Gothenburg, yes, with all the tone poems and that 3D CD set, which is a much more normal performance. It's quite good. But this one is interesting. First of all, the first movement, the Maidens of Sorry, is quite slow. It's very deliberate until it gets moving, then it's very exciting. And the Swan of Twinella comes second. It comes third with Segerstam, my other big choice. And Lemminkäinen in Twinella is also somewhat deliberate, 15 minutes long. Let me see how long these other people do it in, just out of curiosity. Let's see, 16. No, it's not so bad. I mean, what's his name? Venska here is even slower. But what's his name? Esa-Pekka Salinen's 13 minutes. And Segerstam is 17 minutes. So when this came out, let me put it to you this way. When this came out, this was considered hair-raisingly slow. Now it's not so much, but it's really, really impactful. Again, you have the recording, the engineering really helps. You have the engineering with the incredible bass drum throbbing underneath the whole thing that just shakes the room, and it really adds a lot. So Lemminkäinen in Twinella is lots of fun, but the coolest thing about this, I think actually, is Lemminkäinen's return. This is one of the few performances that really realizes Sibelius' intention to start out at a moderate tempo and consistently speed up until at the end you're flying along like a bat out of hell. That's what it's supposed to sound like, and this does it, and it does it with such hair-raising excitement. It just blows my mind, and it really surprised me that this disc never got into the BIS Complete Sibelius edition. It really deserved to because it was so much better than Venska's first version. In any case, the second one is another issue. It's still quite good, but I would never have abandoned this. Fortunately, it's still available. BIS doesn't tend to delete things so quickly, and I strongly recommend that you give it a shot because I just think that for atmosphere and tension and intensity, it gives you the best of everything. That and the Segerstam with the inner movements in the other order. Those are the two that you really need to have. So you should have, let's summarize this very quickly. You should have this one, and you should have this one. And you will be all set for Lemminkäinen and his various adventures. The Second Symphony of Sibelius. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.